Hey, welcome in. We are so glad that you have joined us for a very, very special edition of Beyond Hiawatha. The Miracle Lives On. And we are excited today to welcome in a couple of people that have been part of the trajectory of Hiawatha. Uh, Especially in Dawn's case, it goes back a number of decades, all the way back to early childhood. The other unique thing about these two is that they have a ministry. And I think that it's probably safe to say its birth is Hiawatha Youth Camp related. As is their relationship. They were two that, weren't supposed to date while they were at camp, but so be it. And they wound up getting married,
We
and
did
here they are.
not.
We didn't while we were at camp.
Man, August, baby.
You waited till August.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, way to go. Dad would be proud. But anyways, we welcome in today Doug and Dawn Routledge, and it is good to see you. You both look fantastic, and man, welcome into the podcast.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, excited, and we've been talking and sending some questions, and as I got going, actually, with some of the questions that I could send to you, and of course everybody who listens in will understand that usually we go off on some rabbit trail from the questions that we've started with. But the list of questions that I could ask you, I realized, okay, we're way over time if we cover all of this.
Mm-hmm.
But we start a lot of times with most of our guests, and I want to start it with you. What is your first memory of landing on the grounds at Hiawatha Youth Camp? And Dawn, I've got to start with you because you're going back a number of years, even before Doug's arrival. So what do you remember about those early days, and probably even, is it pre-camper for you? I mean, are you
Absolutely. Yeah,
coming
for sure.
over as just
In
a
fact,
kid?
um, you're gonna have to get me some Kleenex because I'm for sure gonna cry.
Sure.
Yeah, and I know I'm crying right away, I guess, because it was such a big deal. So my mom was went to meetings at Hiawatha pregnant, for me. So camp really did begin right at the beginning. We only had 1 week of vacation a summer as a child, and Hiawatha and the services there took at least 3 nights of those vacations. Um,
Oh,
I grew up rural, and so the exposure to excellence in ministry was something that we didn't have. We had an incredible loving community, but not excellence in ministry. And so my very first memory was a Saturday celebration because the lights changed. I was single digits, but I have a memory before this, but it's not necessarily camp directed. It was more a Laker that showed me love in a pew. Because if you remember that time, at that time, children were perfect when they attended services at camp. I remember you and your brother in particular, and my dad complimenting your dad for how he was parenting because you guys didn't move during the service either, and neither could we. So that's really my first memory. But my second memory, I was at school and we went to a public school enough to know that my friends didn't know Jesus.
mm,
So fast forward to a Saturday celebration, the lights are changing and I feel the Spirit of God for the first time.
mm,
And I didn't know that, but that excellence, and that's all it was at that time, the excellence created a space where I felt the Spirit of God. And I knew that if my friends could experience this, they would want Jesus. I
mm.
mean, that was my rationale. And so that's a key that has followed me all of my life.
Yeah.
Like, do everything you can to the very, very best, because then there's no room for Satan to play on your watch in
Mm.
the periphery. And so that's my first memory.
Okay. Do you have any, and I know the answer to this, but do you have any memory of who the guest was for the Saturday celebration?
I don't. I mean, we
Okay.
saw a lot.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just know that there was always all those transitions, the
Yep.
great jokes, and like it's a little bit fast, and there's going to be turning, and the light's going to turn, and they're going to try to touch heaven with a crowd.
Yeah. Well,
And
and the staff used to come walking down uh
oh yeah,
those balcony
yeah,
risers, and come across, and they'd kick that thing off, and I remember, I mean, this is going back to my first year on staff, and even a year or two before, they had this like probably 10-minute opener that they did.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
music. I mean, I remember
Oh,
all that
I
stuff.
sang that one.
And
Absolutely. I mean,
yeah,
later that was one of my favorites because you felt like you were part of something that was really big because there's a lot of,
yeah,
so you're part of something that's big and you're singing and then you're interacting with people because your dad made us do a lot of conversations. I took that very seriously. I didn't try to escape. Man, I was having those conversations.
yeah.
So, yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. All right. So now I'm gonna stick with you for just a minute because let's fast
You
forward
want me to leave the
um
room?
because
Speak freely, speak freely amongst
Doug will
yourselves. I'll just-
Doug will call you back. Well, no, the only reason I want to stick
20
with that
years.
is because it's probably not too long after and you're a camper. True?
In my era, there wasn't junior camp, so I didn't come as a camper until seventh grade. That was the first
Okay.
time we were allowed to come. And I came in seventh grade and brought as many kids as I could with us, which is one van full.
Hmm.
And that continued for forever.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I started coming as a camper in seventh grade, just a few years, and then I joined staff at 15. So I think I was only a camper for
Nice.
2 or 3 years,
Yeah.
and then came on staff. And then my first summer on staff, I worked in the office. I did 1 week in the kitchen, but the rest of the time was in the office. And my grandpa that went to heaven a few years ago, but he's the reason that we're connected to Hiawatha.
Sure.
One of the first cottage owners, and you know his whole story and our family story there.
Yep.
But I got back all of the letters that I had written to them through childhood, basically at camp in the summer and in college after they died. And many of the letters in the summer, I wrote to them every week from the office and told them how many campers were there and how many salvations and things that they could be praying about.
Yeah.
And very significant, like, oh, please pray. There's over 100 campers this week and we're out of space. And this is what my job is at the office. And so, yeah, that was my very first summer on staff and full of spiritual optimism because I knew God was going to do something great there. And I was just joining it. Like it wasn't, you're just going to join something that I know God's going to do. And
Yeah.
it was awesome. So, and that's at 15, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. No, that's incredibly cool. That is incredibly cool. All right, Doug. So let's get to you now. We're gonna skip childhood and skip.
I was 4, and it's
You remember that first Saturday
1937.
celebration?
Yeah,
No, you are coming in. You are coming in a little bit later in life. You have already established ministry. In fact, you've been
yeah,
part of ministry,
yeah,
and then we were talking about this before we started. We were mutually teaching at a place called Trinity, and I
yeah.
don't even know how you wound up there. Because you were in Miami, but then you headed back north because that's where family was and everything.
Yeah.
So give us just a little bit of that background that leads you to there, because that's what ultimately leads you to Hiawatha.
Yeah, so not great circumstances.
Right.
Miami was a burnout city to work in. It was great ministry. I still have lots of relationships with students that were there when I was there. So that it was a great ministry, but I was a workaholic. So I was just grinding it out, and I knew I was a workaholic, and I knew I was kind of burning myself out. So I moved back in to the Detroit area, and I thought I was going to take a church, and it didn't work out. Just one of those things. So here I am back home, living in my parents' basement, temporary. It's just going to be temporary. And then I'm living in their basement and I'm trying to find a job. And I started selling carpeting just in the meantime. And then
Mm.
as a result, mutual friend Wayne Curtis came along and said, yeah, yeah, I know this. I know we just talked to Wayne this week. And he just said, yeah, yeah, there's a place you got to see. So I went down to the office and I applied for this job. I had no idea what it was, and I ended up working at Trinity for 3 years. And those were influential years too.
Mm.
Still have some relationships of kids who were part of that ministry too. And but to make ends meet, I was speaking like virtually every weekend,
Sure.
like around the country. I was on planes and never trains. That would have been fun, but I was always, going somewhere, and it was okay. It met the financial needs and burdens of the time, but I was burned out. I was in kind of a bad place emotionally and spiritually. I end up at Trinity, and you ask me, "Hey, my dad's got this camp." That's where we knew each other from college, way back in the
Way
day.
back in the day, yeah.
Way back in the day. Yeah.
Tyndale.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was a student at Tyndale. Doug would just, fly in under the radar every once in a while. Everybody knew Doug, and he was there for like an hour or two, and then he'd take off.
Just cameo appearances for the professor's sake. Just
It was a cameo. Yeah, yeah. And you were aware of Hiawatha,
sure.
but had not been there. And yeah, I knew that there was going to be a need that summer for in this case executive staff. And it's not like you were coming in necessarily like a rookie 15-year-old staff member. You were coming in as an exec right off the bat. And I remember having that discussion. I talked about it with my dad, and I said, look, there's this guy, you're going to know him. And so anyways, and I basically thought it was a pipe dream that you would decide to come. I really figured, he's going to have something far more important that he needs to do for the summer. And somehow it worked out.
Yeah. So I was doing all that speaking, and it was the first time that it had happened in, I don't know, a decade, where I had 4 weeks back to back in July. I couldn't book them. I
Mm.
couldn't get, I don't know if I'd worn out my welcome everywhere or if everybody had heard the three messages I had. I don't know what it was, but
We know that's not true.
well, basically, I can't, I'm like, this is actually the moment, Billy. I don't know if I ever told you this. I'm sitting at home, I have nothing booked, and I'm watching Jeopardy with my mom. It's like May. If you remember, I was a
Yeah.
last minute sign
Oh yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And I am thinking, if I am sitting here in July watching Jeopardy with my mom at 7:30, just shoot me. Just shoot me. That's just not the way I want the summer to go. And
Yeah.
that's when I made a decision. I'm gonna go and do something. I'm not gonna sit at home. And so I packed up my truck and I called you pretty much last minute and said, if you still need me, I'm gonna come. I had zero idea. So I remember buying two new suits at Silverman's, which
My goodness.
right.
Yeah.
Which became they became epic suits because everybody borrowed them. Like people would borrow. And I had three or four suits. So I bought two new suits and flew up and that was it. I drove onto the campgrounds
Yeah.
and
So give me your first I mean, can you remember your first thought when you pulled on there? You probably were like, I really need to be with my mother watching Jeopardy right now.
no, no, it was never that. It was always like, okay, God, I'm here. Like, but where do I go? Like, I had no idea.
Yeah.
And I don't think there was anybody at the office at the time when I arrived because, I'm kind of an early arriver.
Yeah.
And so I knew when staff was going to get there, and I'm like, well, I'm here. And I just remember looking around and I thought, okay, I'm here. This is where I'm going to
Yeah.
be for a while. What do you got for me?
Here we
And
go.
I really did think that. I thought, what do you got for me, God? Because I mean, remember, I was in a tough place emotionally. Things hadn't just necessarily worked out. I was doing ministry,
Yeah.
but um, but it wasn't the game plan I'd written when I was in college. That's for
Sure.
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 So
Yep.
yeah, yeah, it was significant.
Yeah.
I can't even tell you who I met first. I don't know.
Well, it's such, when you do arrive on the grounds, and especially even more so back in that day, there was plenty of work that had to be done.
Yeah,
Now they're about to experience that this summer for the first time in a
yeah,
long time. They're not going to know what hit them, uh,
yeah,
because it's not like meetings and sessions and games and get-togethers. No, they're going to be working.
yeah.
But that's kind of the way it was back in that day. There was always so much to be done to the grounds and everything. So you just basically got in and, hey, here's a mower, and away we go. But I do remember you. Um, well, first of all, you loved sports, so that helped immensely because that's part of every day at camp.
Yeah.
And you also became pretty good friends, and maybe even before you're friends with Dawn, you were friends with, I want to say, Drew.
Andrew
Yeah.
Schmidt
Andrew Schmidt. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
We're gonna see him
in July.
in July. Yeah.
yeah. Isn't that awesome?
It is
I do
awesome.
I do remember you guys hanging out quite a bit that first summer, which I thought was really cool that you had, because camp is all about relationships and hanging out with people and that kind of thing. So
Yeah, it was cool.
um, all right, so talk to me before we get into all the spiritual stuff. Talk to me about, do you remember the two of you, your first interaction together, or were there sparks that were flying immediately, or was that kind of a long-term simmering thing?
I'll answer first.
Go ahead. Yours is not as exciting.
I remember a table. I remember the table I was sitting at when she introduced herself to me.
Okay.
So my first impression, because she didn't tell me what her name was, she came up with a pseudonym.
Okay.
So she said she was Brooke Shields. And I'm like, all right. Again, I'm 30 and I'm like, all right, whatever. So
What am I dealing with here? Uh,
that's all I just remember, well, okay, so you're Brooke Shields, fantastic. That's going to help later in conversation. But that's what I remember. That's it for me. It took a little bit. Not that, I was 30. I was coming into a camp. There were a bunch of young people there.
yeah.
I was a little bit in a different phase.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you'd already been through some ministry and like you said, some hurt and heartbreak and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
so would you say that summer, and we'll get to Dawn's answer in just a second, but again, we're kind of going off on a trail here that I don't want to leave alone. Is it possible that summer then also became a bit of a healing place for all of that?
Oh, no question. So, what I remember, I don't want to slight the relationship that Dawn and I have, but what I remember is, I've been speaking at every camp known to mankind across the country. And I came onto that ground, and the very first meeting, I thought, I'm not sure I'd do it this way, but God's here.
Hmm.
And that's the thing. The first time I spoke, I'm like, not sure that's how I do it, but God was here. And that was my sense the entire time, that God was here. There was something different. I've got a friend who says there are parts of the Earth's crust. I don't think this is good theology, by the way. I think it's probably Native American, but he said, there are thin spots on the Earth's crust,
Mm-hmm.
where there's a communication between God and man. But I feel
Thin
like
space.
Hiawatha was a sacred space,
Mm.
and I do, I do, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So Dawn, go
Bill,
ahead.
before you do that, let me tag into something else.
Sure.
I just want to tag onto that because it was that space that allowed my faith to keep growing. So, in that space that was prayed into for so long. So, without grabbing from your family's history, with my family's history, there was so much prayer all the time from what went on at the grounds. And so it just was saturating that. Like you could probably go there in the middle of February and walk on the property and feel God's presence because generations prayed that God would do something there.
Yeah.
And God just uses spaces and buildings. It's not like he has to have them, but the fact that he chose those spaces was pretty powerful. And again, in my naivety spiritually, I just kept feeling like if I can get my friends to the space, they'll experience Jesus.
Yeah.
And it took a long time before I recognized that spirit could be transferred.
Yeah.
That, it could go somewhere else. God could show up somewhere else just as powerfully. The podcast name is Beyond Hiawatha, and it took a long time to realize, like, beyond this space, God can take the same spirit here.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah. And I think that takes that took a long time for me to understand too.
Yeah.
There was just something about being there. And it felt like when camp was over, and you probably can recall these days, especially maybe the first couple of years you're on staff, camp's over and campers leave. And the next day staff leaves and it's like there's sagebrush rolling across the grounds, and you almost felt like the rapture had come, and here I am in this desolate place.
Yeah.
And it drove me crazy um until you come to the point where you realize what a privilege it has been to be here. Now I'm supposed to take this and do something with it.
And I'm sorry.
No, no, go.
I because of Hiawatha, did an outreach at my school. I was a senior in high school. Mark Reed was one of the favorite
Yeah.
speakers, and he helped me through. He came for $500 to my school. I talked to the principal. I got to do a school assembly. The whole school came because this is my last chance for my friends to hear Jesus. So again, in my mind, not just not with full understanding. I mean, I bring Mark in like there's going to be a revival.
Yeah.
There wasn't a revival.
Mm.
And again, like, I wanted to bring it and it didn't work. It was a complete win. I mean, we got to share Christ at my entire public high school and do a thing at night. And back then, who does that? And how did I come up with $500? I mean, it was a lot of donations of $20 and a principal saying yes and all kinds of things that had happened. And Mark had to say yes. I come from Chicago and, believe in this and believe in the ministry of Hiawatha and through its people. And, but yeah, just that beyond Hiawatha concept is, it's the discipline of the work and the prayer before, during, and after. And we get so used to the entitlement to the result of I do this thing and God's going to do something great.
Mm.
And that's not always true.
Right.
Dependence on the Spirit of God. And we got to experience that at Hiawatha.
I think I don't want to over spiritualize this, but God's spirit rests where there's anticipation of his movement. I mean, and I feel that all over and over again. So for me, it's a home. This was a home
I'm
base.
sorry, but I'm getting a pin out actually because I am going to write that down. That is too
Right.
good.
Hope I can remember it because that's my problem.
The Spirit of God rests where there is anticipation. I think that's what you said basically.
Anticipation of his movement. Yeah, I anticipate he moves and he dwells in that place of expectation. I really believe that.
Yeah.
I think so. It was home. It was a spiritual home because we knew we were going back to battles, whatever the battles were, we were heading back to those. We were insulated from them for a while. And I will tell you that I sensed the same thing. That's why I'm saying I'm not over spiritualizing it. But when we were outside of Jerusalem, I felt that same, this is my home. Like I never understood that before,
Yeah.
but I understood there's a deeper connection here. There's something going on here. And I could live here forever. I could live here, which was really strange concept because I'm not Middle Eastern and I didn't grow up there.
Yeah. Yeah, that is unique. I think too, part of the camp thing is that again, that you have to get used to when you're home, even like Don, what you were talking about with your experience in high school. When you get to camp, if it doesn't happen on Sunday, all right, well, let's see what happens on Monday. Well, if it doesn't happen on Monday, we got Tuesday, and now we got Tuesday night. And well, you know what? We still didn't get a decision Tuesday night, but hey, Wednesday's coming, and Wednesday's always a powerful day. And if it doesn't work on Wednesday, you got Thursday. I mean, it is that 24/7 for a week opportunity to hear from God and to watch him move, in the lives of kids and in the lives of yourself. And that there is something about that atmosphere that you can't replace that when you come home and you have to kind of get back into the grind of the day to day. That helps with that atmosphere that we're talking about. That's for sure. Dawn, I do not want to forget, we've got to come back because I do want to know your first reaction and all that kind of thing. But this leads me to another question. There was a week of camp where you wound up bringing, or there just wound up being at camp a bunch of kids from Reading.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking there was a decent amount of the football team.
It was just it was really special. Again, it's by then, Mark Woodard had also fallen in love with Hiawatha, which worked out really well for
Okay.
me because, it's no secret that I was in love with Mark Woodard. And so, we're going to do this ministry together. We're going to get our peers to come. And with that multi-force, because God had called us both to evangelism, we just didn't know, I didn't know it wasn't together. But it was awesome to watch God do things. Again, the privilege of staff is that it's not just that week that you mentioned, it's the next week and the next week and the next week. And to push it forward, and what's difficult is you can't just bring somebody in a space for 1 week and expect it to be transformative. The longer that you walk with the Spirit of God, the more transformative it is. And so, yes, they showed up and there were decisions made that are still holding today. There are some that are not holding today, but they remember when they tasted and saw that God was good.
Hmm.
So it was really cool. Again, in rural, which is why we're doing what we're doing today, there is no way to give that to those students. A place that's big enough and exciting enough and excellent enough to move away distractions and hear the Spirit of God. And Hiawatha did that. I did that for my friends for years and years, and then later our students.
Yeah.
And it's significant.
There's
So
something.
go ahead, Doug.
There's something really deep and profound, and we saw it at Hiawatha where kids wouldn't want to go home. And whether their home life was terrible or not, that's beside the point. They wanted to stay in that place. And they came back for this thing, the blue light special, which was a
Yeah.
king
Yeah.
term, and you're like, who's going to come back? Who can afford? And it was affordable, so kids came back. And I remember thinking, they can't wait to be back in this place. And I know that you felt it all year long. When can we get back to that place? When can we get back to that place? I think, what Dawn is highlighting is that we all kind of yearn for that. And 7 days, I think, is imperative. I think 7 days is imperative. There's actually some great sociological study on that. You can make life change in 7 days.
Mm.
And it was pretty interesting. Hiawatha was a 7-day camp.
Yeah.
Now, for the staff, it was unfortunate because they roll out at 9, and you're like, see ya.
Yeah.
And then
You got about 6 hours before the
Yeah,
next
you're
group came
lucky.
in.
yeah.
Yeah.
You were in
Yeah,
7
for sure.
days.
Oh yeah, I'm not gonna.
Oh, it's just good teaching. Yeah.
No, yeah, I mean, so there was sorry, I'm digressing.
You're
There
good.
was a Stanford University prison experiment where they built a fake prison and they just used grad students. None of these guys were criminals. They brought them in for 7 days, and they divided them into prison guards and convicts. And they treated them like convicts, and the prison guards began to assimilate power through it,
Mm.
and it became abusive within 7 days. In fact, the experiment was set to go for 14 or 21 days. They ended it after 7 days because they said, if we keep on doing this, it's going to create permanent damage, psychological damage to the people involved. There were prison riots, there were fights, it's amazing what happens in 7 days.
Mm.
And I say it's no coincidence that church happens every 7 days. It keeps us from having riots, spiritual riots all the time. 7 days is critical, and I think you were one of the remaining 7-day camps.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, it's yeah, there's not a ton of them, that's for sure. And it's still they still get repeat, even though they got to go home.
Yeah.
Somehow convince their parents, hey, turn around and bring me back on Sunday.
Yeah.
Because I want to go back again. So that part continues to amaze, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Dawn, who was and I think I know, but I just want to,
Yeah.
maybe I don't. Who was the speaker the week that you brought that football team?
Mark Reed.
Mark Reed was. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't remember the secondary speaker that week, and I shouldn't word it like that. The other speaker.
Yeah. The Bible teacher.
That's right. That's right. So, but we actually had a few summers that there was a chunk of people. And of course, we had our favorites. We were on staff, so we knew who to have our friends come to what weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, Don Loney was for sure one of them because Don can speak to rural like nobody's business because he's just straightforward.
Yeah.
And
that's kind of where I was going.
Yeah,
because
he was one of the weeks for sure.
Wait,
you guys had a special relationship with Don.
Yeah.
Yeah, he ties into our story for our whole lives.
So can
Yeah.
we go back? Because I want to hear what Dawn's impression of me was.
Yes,
We
yes,
talked
yes.
about that
We
before,
need
but
to. Like I said, we
No,
always
it's all
wind up
right.
off of a
You
trail.
can
So,
edit whatever you want.
but yeah. So, Dawn, first impression of Doug, or what
Sure, sure.
what
He's
was your thought when you told him I am Brooke Shields?
sure. Well, I'd already told my parents I was going to marry him by that point before I'd even met him. So that's
My
the start of it.
she
So,
has a
oh,
deal. She has a deal worked out with your dad to bring her husband in. She runs home and tells her parents, I met him. This is the guy. I had nothing to do with it.
oh, oh, yeah, there's the story.
Uh,
So, no, because Ellen had met Bill her fifth summer. So I just told your dad, this is my fifth summer. I'd like to meet my husband. Um, Laura came up to me at training and said, okay, like my father-in-law has two guys for you. One of them was Andrew Schmidt and the other one was Doug. Um, of course, this is all in jest, but
yeah,
it was just really fun. And I came into the dining room. Doug was there. He had just a group of people around him laughing. Like he was kind of like leading the charge. I'm like, oh,
yeah,
cocky, but man, is he good looking. I bet we could do something with that. So anyway, I mean, that's the short version. And I did race to my grandparents' cottage where my parents were staying. I just said, I just met my husband. I know I did. And then I heard him speak. And we did question and answer devotions in my cabin once a week. And, the girls were out the questions and I would meet with Doug and he would give me the chapter and verse of how to answer them. I mean, come on. He's smoking hot and he loves Jesus and he can communicate the word of God and he can play guitar.
yeah,
So anyway,
yeah. He has shown me home.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What the Lord requires of me. Yeah, I
So we keep
remember that
saying,
one.
Still the only song I can play.
baby.
Well, it was a good one. It was a good one, man. I remember that one well.
Yeah.
So, well, that is so interesting that you were just
And it didn't
spot
happen that
on.
fast. I mean, again, you can only do so much by force of will. So we did date at the end of the summer.
Yeah,
We had our first date at the very end of August. Um, and we dated on and off for 2 years while we tried to figure out what the tension is between I want to be a tribal missionary, or do whatever it takes to give God everything that I have. And he's a suburban guy and does big church ministry and with big gifts and abilities. And how does that fit together? So we
yeah,
had to wrestle that out together. Your dad was part of those conversations. Don Loney was very much a part of those conversations. I mean, I went to Tennessee to talk to Don Loney about Doug.
mm,
So
yeah. So, are you're on staff together then, as a dating couple for a couple of years?
well, we did the 1 year. We started a date at the end of that, but everybody knew that there was chemistry there.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
of course, there's no cell phones, there's no social media, so people
yeah,
don't know what's happening in our lives. We had broken up. I went to Irian Jaya, Indonesia, in the Bird's Head Peninsula to a tribe before, like, I was in college. So after college gets out early, all the way through, like, camp's going to start like the 1st of July or something. So
yeah.
I was there for a couple of months, climbed a mountain, gave my singleness to God. Um, and wrote to Doug that entire time. And there's too much to go into the complicated details, but my mom had actually asked Doug if he could give me a ride to camp because we didn't have a vehicle that we could do that for me for that summer.
Which is
Well,
really
mom.
so
Yeah, right.
I'd already decided, yeah, I'll go back. I'll go back. So and that second summer I was in and out quite a bit more,
Yeah.
but I needed to come back. I did know that,
Good
and I
place
was
to
going
spend
to I
her.
was
Yeah.
going to be there
But we hadn't
wherever.
talked for months.
Yeah, we had not. In
Huh.
And
fact, I hadn't even read the letters. It was a little too painful, so I had a stack that I had to catch up on, and
you didn't catch up on it. We
I
found
did.
them when we
Yeah, but
moved you out of
I,
your
I
house.
but I read them after the fact.
After you're engaged.
Yeah, I read them.
But yeah, we got in Doug's little Ford Ranger and out in the Detroit area and drove to camp. And we didn't speak until we hit the dirt road. And we hit the dirt road, and I said, well, we left here and people thought we were getting married. So what are we going to say?
Didn't take long. We figured it out.
Probably 2 hours later, we were dating again, and that was the end of the story.
Yeah, it was miserable for a year, that's for sure. But Yeah,
Isn't that something?
it is. It is.
I don't recall that part of the
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
I thought it was just smooth sailing from the time you
Oh, no, not at all. It
started
was really
dating.
that tension. It was really that ministry tension of, and I don't want to misspeak because I married Doug because I thought he was the greatest man in the world, and I still think that. So, but at the time, I didn't think he was doing what God had created him to be to the fullest.
Mm.
And that couldn't do that, because I could see who that was. And at the time, I mean, my convictions were very strong. I was a firstborn, probably not always very nice in my convictions, but I want to do something that's going to cost everything and huge and big for God. Again, wrong perspective for God instead of what's he going to do with me to shape me and grind me down. But that's where I was at that time in my faith. And so we had to figure that out,
Mm.
get out together. And, even Don Loney had given a warning, like, it's not time. And I won't tell you all the things that Don said about Doug at the time.
Not all of them great.
Yeah. But then, I mean, almost a year later, I went back to him and I said, I really think I want to marry Doug. And he's like, and now he's ready.
Mm.
And kind of gave that permission to marry Doug.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, he was instrumental in launching this ministry as well.
Yeah.
One of the greatest challenges that in fact, there's a quote up on my wall. But when he called us idiots, we told him about, this ministry concept. And we were praying for somebody else to go because that's what, we were pretty content doing what we were doing. And he said, you guys are idiots, because he's pretty candid. And we said, okay. And he said, you're idiots. Who else do you think is praying, Lord, send me to the middle of nowhere? And then he said, has it ever dawned on you, you might be the answer to your own prayer? And
Mm.
frankly, it never had dawned on us.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And when he said that, we said, okay, it was pretty much that fast. He's right. It's
Mm.
us. And so Don was significant. We had a bunch of conversations, visited him, and yeah. I mean, he always said God's more concerned with who you are in him than what you do for him. And I was a quintessential, let me get stuff done for God. And
Same.
God just had to write himself into our hearts during those years. So it was
Yeah.
good. Again, another Hiawatha tie,
Yeah.
just so significant.
Yeah. He preached his last message at Hiawatha.
Mm-hmm.
And that was
Yeah.
and Don was a stickler for time because of recordings, radio, all that kind of stuff that he was dead on. And that night
Stay okay?
he just kind of kept going. And kept going. And Dad was even like, and then he figured it out. He doesn't want to stop because he knows this is it. But yeah, amazing ministry, and
Yeah.
an amazing impact that he had. He had an impact even on our church, because he was part of getting that first piece of property, and went with my grandfather, and guy offered him the corner lot on Eureka, $15,000. Don said, we'll take it.
Yeah.
Slammed his fist down. And so my grandpa's like, well, you must have a great plan. And then he went out of the country for like 2 weeks. Anyhow, take me to again, going back to, and this can be at any stretch, any time period, but are there any and I know we've already talked about Mark Reed and we've talked about Don, but any other, services, messages, speakers, just are there any of those moments that have hung with you, stayed with you, that you can still kind of, oh yeah, I remember exactly where I was type thing?
Let me speak to it first. Or
Yeah, go ahead.
So I just have some like hit and miss highlight ones, like Colonel McGuckin. Again, the laughter was so extreme. And this is not to be super spiritual, but my thought was always like, who's listening and how is this helping him meet Jesus? And that's what I wanted so bad. And communicators, we don't have great communicators always in rural America. So having a communicator that like makes you roll in laughter and then like punches you in the gut with a gospel, and then you have to do something about it. We got that on repeat. And so, I mean, there was services by, Miles and Colonel, and like just there's a lot of different people that had little spot sermons. Probably though, for me, the ones that actually hang long term with the content. There's a lot of Tuesday ones. Probably the one that sticks out the most is Ecclesiastes 10:1. Even a fly causes, the perfume, even one fly causes a perfume to stink.
Fly in
And
the ointment.
yeah, yeah. And for me, that was just a big deal because I recognize like I want to be pure before God. Like I don't even want that one stupid fly. I want to figure out what that is and get it out of there.
Mm.
And it was on repeat so much, again, because the privilege of staff, you hear it for eternity. I
Yeah.
felt like sometimes. Um, but hearing it on repeat, but that's still something that's like, I don't want a foothold of Satan anywhere in my life. And that's still a guiding one. And then the other one was a Thursday one for sure of just don't quit.
Mm.
I needed that. In fact, while you're talking next, I'm gonna go grab, I meant to grab it. I have a quote from your dad, just a letter that he wrote to me, and I laminated a piece of it.
Mm.
Because this ministry, first of all, our first ministry together was at a big church. I mean, it had like 4,000 people in it when we left. And it was a totally different ministry for me. It fit Doug and who he was and his gifts and abilities, but for me, it was really hard because of all the politics and doing
Mm.
things right. And
Yeah.
there's like, I don't mean this disrespectful. There's almost like this game that has to be played to do the work that you're doing. And that was foreign for me. And so that was a time where your dad really stepped in and kept me learning and willing to learn how to do that.
Mm.
And then with Crossroads, it's brutal. And your dad just, don't be weary. Keep going.
Mm.
Hang on. And I could call him literally crying and just say, I'm weary and well doing. I want to quit. And so so that message of don't quit, long before I knew I was going to need it, 10, 15, 30 years later, literally, I needed that message then. So I hear it a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, I came in at a different place in life, and
Mhm.
so it was the conversations
Mm.
that mattered more to me,
Sure.
That's
and
good.
and they marked my life. Significant conversations, things that I carried out that I still use, that I still, lean back on,
Yeah.
and I guess I've lived my life based on sound bites that I picked up at Hiawatha more than anything. Sorry. So, um, and I'm trying to remember who told me. All I can remember, one of the California guys, sweatsuit. He wore a
That
sweatsuit.
was Miles.
No, I don't think it
Oh, the
was
Uh,
Miles.
little
Yeah,
Howard Hugo.
Howard
Howard.
Hugo.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So Howard was working through confession, and the two questions, Lord, where have I grieved you? Where have I quenched your spirit? And that even now is a pattern for me, Lord. Where have I grieved you? Where have I quenched your spirit?
Mm.
That was a significant moment that's marked me. I'm trying to think. Wendy Collins marked me
Oh,
with a simple statement. He just
my
said, and he
goodness.
wasn't your most dynamic speaker by any stretch, but he said things that were penetrating.
Yeah.
And I remember he said, "You are the sum total of the friends you make and the books you read." Now, you can replace books for the, social media you consume from the media you consume or whatever. But that's really true. The friends you have and what you allow to infiltrate your mind
Yeah.
really does define you. It becomes you.
Yeah.
That was significant. Again, Don Loney, just over and over again. There were so many minutes because I was a note taker. And I remember thinking, that's significant. I need to remember that.
Yeah.
And there were a million of them. Notwithstanding, your father influenced me significantly. Um, and we were having a weird conversation. I felt like I was a child born after, how did Paul say it? In undue time or whatever it was.
Mm.
I felt like he just had adopted me, knowing some of the difficulties that I'd struggled with, knowing that the route had been tough. And he pulled me aside and he said this after I'd spoken one time. He said, "Well, I don't necessarily know about leadership or about, strategy or any of that." But he was the first man. He said this. He said, "But you can preach." And that has been something that I've consistently struggled with.
Mm.
That self-doubt, that concept that maybe maybe that's not who I need to be at the moment. And Don keeps on reminding me that's actually who God made you to be. Your dad was the one who said it. And he was the only one who ever said, I mean, people tell you, nice sermon, great, that really bad, all of that. But this wasn't after a sermon. This was just him speaking into my life.
Yeah.
And that marked me pretty profoundly. His ability um, to win people to himself and then to spot. We use these four letters, I see in you, I see in you. And he was the guy who, more than anybody else, said, I see in you. That
Sure.
was
Yeah.
significant.
That's
Yeah.
huge. Yeah.
More
Well, and
than
I'll
yeah.
say this, Doug, there are we often ask the question, musicians, messages, can you recall? And very often through these podcasts, we've heard Miles, we've heard Doug, Don Loney, we've heard, the Howards and all that kind of stuff. But very often, Doug Rutledge's name has been mentioned with those, and I still recall some messages that you delivered. One on the Ten Commandments that I've never heard the thoughts, the concepts that you shared in that repeated. But basically, you were saying to the entire audience, guess what, guys? We've broken all of them.
Yeah.
We are guilty of all of them. And another one I think that my wife would say was her favorite, and I believe this is you. Is there a message about a still small voice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, for
Yeah.
sure. That's one of his big ones. Yeah.
Yeah. She still remembers that. And the other thing though that drove us nuts about Doug Rutledge is he refused to repeat the message. It's like, Doug, you got to preach that message.
Yeah. Well,
It's still a problem.
I chalk that up to a lack of discipline, writing stuff down and remembering where you put it. So,
Yeah, you're like, I can't repeat it because I can't remember
I can't really find it. And boy,
it.
we've got reams of sermons stacked away. And Don says, "Why don't you do that one again? That was pretty meaningful." I'm like, God's still speaking. I mean,
That's his thing. But what if God's saying something new? I
yeah,
don't want to get trapped in something old. If he's saying something new, I got to listen today.
yeah.
Yeah.
So how
No, there's nothing
admirable.
wrong with that concept. I get that. Would not have worked well for my dad on Tuesday nights, but there you go.
Well, there's genius in that, right? I mean, there's genius in repeating a message because it's your best foot forward. You know that it connects,
Yeah.
and so you just stay the course with it. And I think there's brilliance in repeating a sermon that God uses, as long as your heart is there.
Yeah.
And you don't take it for granted.
Well, and it allowed, I think, too, the other thing is he realized it allowed the staff to prepare. You prepared one time, and then you could kind of zero in. And I don't know about you, but I know there were verses that I probably shared almost on a weekly basis with campers. And actually, you two, if I'm not mistaken, at some point, you two would have been in the back greeting all of them as they they came back to re-solidify the decision they made. And I don't recall, I recall, as you did, Dawn, the fly in the ointment, drive the stake deeper, roll the stone away. I don't recall the exact points. I do know that, as you guys have mentioned, there were those moments when at the end of that service, you would just kind of stand in the back and think to yourself, I have been allowed to be part of something that was really special.
Yeah, it's true.
This has been unique. Okay. So now we're going to fast forward. You guys have gotten married. You're in ministry in Lansing area. Still connected to camp, going to speak, bringing kids, that kind of thing. And then, but the birth of Crossroads Farm Um, just kind of take me through that stage. Um, and I know that right now you're kind of experiencing all those new things
Yeah.
again to a certain extent. So, but what was that? What was that like? And again, that had to be that that had to be as scary as some guy deciding he wants to start a camp in the Upper Peninsula.
Pretty much.
So, so yeah, just take me through a little bit of that background.
Um, the short version, because God's stories are always long because it takes our whole lives.
Yep.
But this segment of time, we have been at Trinity right about 6.5 years. God had given one of the 10 pastors on staff, Emerson Eggerichs, the vision of the teaching of love and respect. And that launched a massive marriage movement that exists to this day. But it was picked up by Focus on the Family. And in a lot of ways, he became Christian famous. And when you're connected to fame, and I say this all, one step removed, all the pastors of the church started getting calls. Hey, come out west, come to this next big church, because you must be a big deal. You're with Emerson Eggerichs.
Mm.
And from the time that I had left rural America and went to college and then joined Doug in ministry, I stayed very burdened for my hometown community.
Mm.
In rural America in general, the average size church is 50. I Now it's so much worse than it was then even, but I had sisters that were still in school, and God had blessed the ministry at Trinity. I mean, I'm going to speak to brag a little bit because that way Doug won't have to brag himself. But I mean, they had never had a full-time youth pastor. It was a church of 1,200 when we got there, and it was 4,000 when we left. Not just Doug's work, but I mean, it went from, a handful of kids to hundreds of kids.
Mm.
And God had really blessed that. And Doug had the opportunity, the church was going to change locations and build, and he had designed a multi-million-dollar youth wing that's there today. It's unbelievable. We were never in it
Mm.
because we recognized if we leave, they'll hire somebody else. What about places that can't afford to hire?
Mm.
And again, the short version of the story is it just took us to our knees. We realized we were committing career suicide. We had 7 different people pray for us in listening prayer. Your dad and Don Loney were 2 of those.
Mm.
Just listen. Don't give God your opinions or anything to see what God's going to say. And let us know what he says. And Don said, I just pray God tell you what to do.
Mm.
So I'm gonna say, but that's where what Doug shared earlier came into play as far as you might be the answer to your own prayer and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it was at that time that God confirmed. Somebody in his 30s called and gave us a verse in Habakkuk. I would say we were not cocky at the time, but our faith was really cocky. And so God's gonna do this awesome thing. So good, there's a verse, and we're gonna tell everybody about it. It's gonna be amazing. And it was in Habakkuk, and who the heck reads Habakkuk? And then a little while later, a woman in her 60s called and she said, well, I have a verse for you. And Doug said, just don't tell me it's in Habakkuk. Same exact verse. And it still didn't mean anything, and it still didn't go on our wall until year 17. But man, we hung on to it because it is talks about, I'll set my watchtowers and give it an answer to the complaint. What am I supposed to do with this? And write it out in big block letters so Harold can run with it. It aches for coming. It'll certainly come. It will not delay. Well, that's not going to be us because we're going to work hard, right? I mean, Doug and I are take the hill people. And the reason it went on our wall at year 17 is when I walk out of my office, I see the word aches because there's 9 million secondary students live in rural America, and they don't know the gospel of Jesus Christ, literally. I mean, at our Ohio branch, a year ago this Easter, Luke, our ministry director there, read through the gospel narrative explaining Easter. And the kid's like, oh, that's what that's about. I mean, they knew God, but they'd never heard of Jesus. That's Ohio. So talk about aches for a coming. And so what God took us through at that point was not just do Crossroads Farm, but do Crossroads Farm and set the feet to allow that to continue, that beyond concept, right? Like beyond this place, beyond Hiawatha, where's God going to take what started here? And that's where we find ourselves today.
Yeah, I don't know what I can really add. I mean, the beginning and then the hardship of starting something. Um, One day I'll publish the book. I mean, I should. It's almost written, I guess, but it's about starting things. And a lot of people are attached to the romance. You know this. I mean, you moved the church, so it became a different place, a different setting, a different, in a lot of senses, different group of people, different neighborhoods,
Yeah.
and different expectations for ministry. And a lot of people love the results of faith, but they don't like the journey of faith.
Yeah.
We like walking through the dry ground of the Red Sea, but we don't like the desert in front. We don't like the Egyptians behind. And I'm like, but those things are the things that shape us and mold us. And so God began to do a work in us over the last, now it's 27 years, where He had to refine us and develop us. And some of that was real dire hardship. Like we went 4 months, and I think in year four, without a paycheck, 4 months without a paycheck. And, you think, why now? Well, because God was still teaching us to trust Him with every small piece of our lives, and um, different place now, but still rely on Him every day. And I think God's still teaching us our vision. In our time, we'll have 5 Crossroads farms up and running, self-sufficient, seeing 100 kids per at least. But we want to set our feet for the next 20.
Mm.
So that's what we're doing. We're setting the organization, the ministry for the next 20 branches.
Yeah.
And that's a different thing too, because there aren't that many hours in a day.
Yeah. Are you guys okay to hang in here for a few more minutes? Because I
Sure.
know you've got a busy schedule, but I think she said you had partitioned off a little segment for this. So if you're good with this, then I haven't done this before, but we're going to call it quits on this
Sure.
edition, and we're going to pick right back up where we leave off with Doug and Dawn, and because we're pushing an hour right now with this one, and I know for some of you listen in and out of the car and that kind of thing. So hey, thank you for listening. Again, we're going to come right back, so you'll get part 2 of this in the next edition, but please make sure you hit subscribe for us so that you know when these are coming out. These are just incredible opportunities for us to speak about the ministry of Hiawatha and what God has done so uniquely in times past, what He is doing today, and what we are hoping He does in the future. And many of you know we have moved to a new location, and man, we need your prayers. And if you are able, man, please consider being a part of the process by donating as well. Just amazing what God has done, and we're excited about it. So you can check it out at hiawathayouthcamp.com. But also please make sure you let people know about this podcast, and we will look forward to coming back with Doug and Dawn in part 2, and we hope to see you then. All right, until then, blessings, and we will talk with you soon.